Picture this. You're at like a networking event, or maybe just a friend's backyard barbecue.
Oh, yeah. Holding a lukewarm beverage.
Exactly. Holding your lukewarm drink, making decent small talk, and then someone drops the most standard, seemingly harmless question in the world. So, what do you do for fun?
Right. And your brain just, well, it completely flatlines.
You completely freeze all the things you actually enjoy doing, just vanish from your mind.
Gone.
And you hear yourself saying something incredibly stiff,
Mm.
like you're giving a sworn testimony in court or something.
You go from being a relaxed human being to a robot delivering a very dry data point.
Totally.
It is the absolute definition of a conversational dead end. And what is so fascinating is that this isn't just a quirk of awkward people.
No, it happens to everyone.
Right, because your brain is actually executing a very specific psychological defense mechanism.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are extracting the hidden psychology from a rather um, unexpected place.
Yeah, a transcript from an English language learning program called the Mr. English Channel.
Right. On the surface, it's a lesson to help language learners speak more naturally about their hobbies, keep the vocabulary simple, that sort of thing.
But beneath that, it is just this brilliant mirror for human communication in general.
It really is. Our mission today is to figure out exactly why our brains flatline in those social situations.
And we'll look at the mechanics of how we inadvertently build like invisible walls with our vocabulary.
Plus, how a slight shift in phrasing can bypass social anxiety to invite genuine human connection.
The jumping off point here is the classic conversational trap. People are taught, often by traditional textbooks, to use these rigid formulas.
Oh, the formulas.
Right. The prime example the source gives is someone standing up and declaring, "My hobby is reading books."
It feels like filing a tax return for your free time.
That is exactly what it sounds like.
My hobby is, it strips all the joy out of the
It
activity.
really does.
But I want to dig into the mechanics of this. Why do our brains default to these dry, factual statements when we feel socially put on the spot?
Well, it comes down to a basic threat response combined with how we adjust our level of formality.
Okay, unpack that a little bit.
So when you put on the spot at that barbecue, the fear center of your brain often interprets that sudden attention as a low-level social threat.
Wait, really? A thread over a question about weekends.
Precisely. You feel like you're being evaluated, and when the brain feels threatened, it looks for the safest route out of the spotlight.
Wow, okay, so we just hide behind safe words.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
We shift to a very formal level of speaking. A factual statement is safe because it is objective.
Right. Nobody can argue with the fact.
Exactly. Saying, "My hobby is reading," is offering a verifiable data point. You are putting up a shield.
And expressing genuine warmth, on the other hand, requires emotional risk.
Yes. We use that formal robotic language as armor because we are terrified of being judged for the things we genuinely care about.
So if that rigid phrasing is our armor like, building an invisible wall between us and the person asking the question, how do we actively dismantle it?
The source text suggests we have to replace those strict rules with the phrasing people actually use in everyday life to signal openness.
Which is much simpler than it sounds. The baseline fix they offer is shifting to, in my free time, I love to.
Yeah. In my free time, I love to go hiking on local trails, or I love to try out new recipes in the kitchen.
It just sounds so much better. It removes the clinical nature of the word hobby and replaces it with an emotion, love.
It does. But, love to still feels a little bit static sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. If you want to signal that this is an active, current obsession, you have to shift the phrasing again.
Exactly. And the material points to a much more engaging phrase, "I'm really into."
Like, I'm really into morning yoga, or I'm really into digital photography.
Linguistically, "I'm really into" does some heavy lifting. It signals strong, genuine enthusiasm right now.
It's very active.
It is. But more importantly, from a psychological standpoint, saying, "I'm really into" operates as an invitation for curiosity.
Because if you offer a dry fact, the listener's brain just accepts the data and moves on.
Right. But if you signal that you are currently absorbed in something, "I'm really into photography," it triggers empathy. The listener naturally wants to know what has captured your attention.
So they ask about your camera or what subjects you shoot. It actively opens a door.
Exactly. It creates a bridge.
Wait, let me challenge that premise for a second, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's say I'm at like a corporate mixer. I'm talking to a senior manager I've never met before. Doesn't saying I'm really into sound a bit too casual for that environment,
I mean, that is a very valid hesitation.
right? Aren't there times when that formal invisible wall is actually necessary for professional self-preservation?
It's exactly why people default to the corporate armor. But think about the goal of that networking event. Are you there to be a forgettable data point?
Well, no. I suppose the goal is to be memorable, but, in a safe way.
Right, but safety often equals invisibility. Even a senior manager is biologically wired for human connection.
That's a fair point.
When you use slightly vulnerable phrasing like, I'm really into, you disrupt that standard robotic script. You show a controlled glimpse of your humanity.
It doesn't mean you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You are just showing genuine enthusiasm for a pastime. That micro level of vulnerability is actually what builds trust.
Far more than maintaining a flawless, robotic professional facade.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense. You were trading a tiny bit of vulnerability for a massive increase in memorability and trust.
Yeah, it's a good trade.
But this brings up another fascinating psychological hurdle.
Oh, the imposter syndrome part.
Yes. If signaling vulnerability is so effective, why do so many people hesitate to use phrases that invite follow-up questions?
Because of the fear of not being an expert.
Right? Imposter syndrome doesn't just apply to our jobs. It absolutely infects our free time, too.
People often operate under this false assumption that if they aren't professionals, they aren't allowed to claim a hobby.
The example from the source that really stood out to me was the person who knows only 3 basic guitar chords,
Oh, that's a classic one.
and they flat out refuse to mention they play because they are terrified someone will immediately demand a full concert on the spot.
We laugh, but that is a deeply rooted fear of social exposure.
It really is. We put immense pressure on ourselves to be perfect at everything we touch.
We treat hobbies as if we are aiming for a trophy rather than just pursuing them to relax and have fun.
We want to avoid that regret you feel after exposing a perceived weakness.
So, how do we talk about our passions without triggering that imposter syndrome?
The material offers a brilliant linguistic workaround for this exact anxiety. The phrase is, I've been trying my hand at.
Oh, I love that one. I've been trying my hand at watercolor painting or trying my hand at baking sourdough bread.
Yes, it is like hanging an under construction sign on your hobby.
That's a great way to put it.
It tells the listener, hey, look at this fun process I'm engaged in, but please do not judge the final product yet.
It gives you total freedom to just be a messy beginner. Let's look at the mechanics of why that works so well.
Yeah, what's happening there?
Linguistically, trying my hand at actively lowers your perceived social status in that specific domain just enough to disarm the listener.
You are deliberately stripping away any pretense of mastery.
Right. By doing so, you completely neutralize the threat of judgment. You aren't claiming to be an artist, you are claiming to be an explorer.
And psychologically, doesn't this often prompt the other person to share their own beginner stories?
Exactly. It levels the playing field completely.
It turns a potential interrogation into a shared confession about, like, messy kitchens or terrible paintings.
It really does. Okay, so once we have removed the pressure of perfection by lowering our defenses, there's another step.
Right, ensuring the words we use actually match the emotional vibe of the activity.
This is where we get into emotional resonance in language. Not every hobby is a high-intensity sport, yet we often lack the simple vocabulary to differentiate between different energy levels.
If you say, I am intensely passionate about jigsaw puzzles, it creates this weird cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, the intensity of the words doesn't match the reality of sitting at a table quietly looking for corner pieces.
Exactly. When your language mismatches the energy of the activity, the listener's brain registers it as slightly fake, even if they don't know why.
So we have to categorize phrasing based on the vibe.
Let's start with active physical activities.
For those, the suggested phrasing is outward facing and high energy. I'm a big fan of.
For instance, I'm a big fan of playing tennis or swimming at the community pool.
Right, it carries a warm, robust energy.
But for those of us who consider surviving Monday through Friday to be enough of an endurance sport, what is the alternative?
For quiet, restful hobbies, the phrasing needs to signal decompression.
Because sometimes the absolute best activity is just curling up on the sofa in complete silence.
Exactly. So the phrase to use is, in my downtime, I enjoy.
As in my downtime, I enjoy listening to history podcasts while cooking or doing large jigsaw puzzles.
Downtime is the magic word there.
It really is, isn't it?
It is because it provides instant context. Downtime explicitly frames the activity not as an achievement, but as a necessary recovery period.
It tells the listener that you are engaging in this activity to just find peace after work.
By aligning the phrasing with the emotional reality of the hobby, you help the listener actually feel the vibe of the activity.
You're setting the emotional stage.
But even if you set the stage perfectly, you drop the armor, you frame yourself as a beginner, you match the energy, you can still hit a wall.
Oh, I know this part. You deliver this perfectly crafted sentence, and the other person just nods, says, cool, and then you are both staring at the floor,
Ah, yes, the dreaded floor stare.
desperately searching for the next topic. Why does that still happen?
Because stating the hobby, even with the right energy, is still just providing the what. It doesn't provide the why.
I think of it like reading the news. Stating your hobby is just giving the headline,
That's a good analogy.
but the why is the actual article. It's the difference between sharing personal data and sharing your humanity.
So, what are the linguistic tools to keep that momentum going?
You have to add a short sentence that explains the internal benefit of the activity.
Right, using phrases like, it really helps me to.
For example, it really helps me to unwind after a stressful day, or clear my head and feel energized.
Alternatively, you can frame it around connection. It's a great way for me to.
Like, it's a great way for me to connect with friends in online gaming communities.
Why does adding that second half change the dynamic so drastically, though?
Because human beings bond over shared values and shared emotions, not necessarily shared activities.
This is a crucial point, especially for people with highly unique interests.
Let's say your hobby is bird watching or collecting vintage postcards.
People often hide these passions because they assume others will find them dull compared to, say, international travel.
They preemptively reject their own interests because they think it lacks social currency.
Exactly. But the moment you explain the why, everything changes.
If you say, I'm really into bird watching, it's a great way for me to disconnect from screens and just practice being completely present in nature, you've transformed the conversation.
The listener might not care about birds at all, but they absolutely understand the deep human desire to escape screens and find peace.
You've given them a universal emotion to latch onto.
Yes. Explaining the why bridges the gap between a niche activity and a universal human need.
It earns respect instantly and attracts people who appreciate those same underlying emotions.
Now, to successfully execute all of this, we also have to be self-aware enough to recognize when our own language is getting in the way.
Yes. The source material for today's deep dive provided some fascinating vocabulary, they call them pocket words, and some truly revealing examples of what happens when communication breaks down.
The pocket words are basically the foundational vocabulary of relaxation. Pastime, unwind, downtime, enthusiast, routine.
Having these loaded in your mental vocabulary allows you to bypass the panic response we discussed earlier.
But the most revealing parts of the text are the corrections of clunky sentences.
I have to bring up the examples they used because they perfectly illustrate how a tiny shift in phrasing changes the entire psychological impact.
Well, let's hear them.
There was a student who wanted to explain the relaxing nature of reading, and they translated their thought literally into, reading gives me the brain rest.
Which is fascinating because it reveals the mental load they're under, but to a native ear, it just sounds, well, a bit off.
Brain rest sounds so clinical.
It does. It sounds like you are being admitted to a hospital for a serious neurological procedure rather than curling up with a paperback.
It is incredibly intense.
The source smooths it out too. Reading really helps me unwind.
Much better. It shifts the tone from medical to casual, which is essential for social comfort.
Another example was I have big passion for nature pictures.
It communicates the point, but it's stiff.
Right. It feels heavy. Smoothing it to, in my free time, I enjoy nature photography, restores the relaxed cadence.
And my absolute favorite moment was when someone tried to talk about exercising and said, I make the hobby of gym.
Oh man, making the hobby of gym sounds like you are literally pouring concrete and constructing a physical fitness center.
Right. But the solution offered for this was so brilliantly abrupt.
What did they suggest?
To fix the tangled, heavy phrasing of, I make the hobby of gym, the suggested pivot is to just say, I'm really into cooking new recipes at home.
Wait, what? It is a complete conversational left turn.
It is, but it highlights such an important reality about human communication.
Which is?
Sometimes when you feel yourself getting tangled in a clunky, overly intense explanation of one topic, the smartest social move is to abandon ship completely.
Just bail out.
Yeah. You don't have to force the conversation about the gym if it's making you sound like a construction worker. Pivot to cooking.
The goal is the flow of connection, not strict factual accuracy about your entire weekend.
Exactly.
But that pivot requires a degree of psychological safety that a lot of people lack in high-stakes social environments.
Which is why the material suggests practicing these transitions in a low-stakes environment first.
They mention using an AI tool, specifically Mr. English AI, to run through role plays.
Practicing small talk with a computer to get better at talking to humans.
It sounds paradoxical, but it works on the principle of lowering the emotional block that prevents you from communicating effectively when you are anxious.
By practicing phrases like downtime or trying my hand at with an AI that cannot judge you, you build muscle memory.
Right, without the threat of a vulnerability hangover.
Once the phrasing becomes second nature, you can deploy it in a real office break room without your brain sounding the alarm.
So, bringing all of this psychological and linguistic theory together, what is our core takeaway here?
Talking about your free time should never feel like a police interrogation.
We have to actively dismantle that invisible wall of formality.
But using active transitions like I'm really into, we invite curiosity.
By saying, I'm trying my hand at, we bypass our own imposter syndrome.
By matching our emotional energy with words like downtime, we set the stage.
And by always including the why, we offer a bridge of shared humanity.
You are shifting your entire communication posture from defensive to open.
You are dropping the armor.
Which leaves us with a final, somewhat provocative thought to consider.
Ooh, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire time talking about how the words we choose change how others perceive our hobbies.
Right.
But there is a concept in psychology which suggests that the language we use actually shapes our own internal reality.
So if you constantly describe your passions using rigid formal language, you might actually start treating them like obligations.
Exactly. If you stop calling it my hobby, like it is the sterile graded assignment you have to excel at, and start saying out loud, I'm trying my hand at it, does it change things?
Does it give you the internal grace to stop worrying about being perfect?
Yes. Does changing your vocabulary literally give you permission to just enjoy the messy, beautiful process of learning something new?
That is a really powerful question.
So the next time you are standing at that networking event, holding that lukewarm drink, and someone asks what you do for fun,
Don't give them a deposition.
drop the armor, tell them what you are really into, and tell them why it makes you feel alive.